So welcome everyone to the eAdvisor MFDA Client Updates webinar. My name is Vanessa Levasseur. I am one of the application training specialists here at Viso Wealth, and I'll be walking you through today's webinar. So we'd like to begin this webinar by acknowledging that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. In particular, in Toronto, we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And in Vancouver, we acknowledge that we are situated on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. So just a few housekeeping items here before we get started. Please be advised all phone lines will be on mute, just so everyone can hear us clearly today on the call. And you will be able to if you have any questions, you will be able to put those in the Q&A or the chat feature that you see on the screen there. So if any questions pop up, feel free to utilize that feature there to enter in your questions, and we'll go ahead and review those questions at the end of the call to answer those questions there. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted to your Academy site in a few business days. So if you'd like to go back to refer to any content that we've gone over, it will be posted to your Academy site there. All right, so the agenda we have lined up for today, we will be going into the eAdvisor training site there. So if you do have access and want to follow along with a fake client there, feel free to do that. We'll first just kind of go through an overview of what to use the client update feature on eAdvisor for, and what are some of the benefits of utilizing this feature versus the other features on eAdvisor. After we do that review, we'll jump straight into the training site there for a live demonstration of a few newer features, going through that client update workflow, showing the standalone address update, and we'll also, kind of do a quick overview of some of those direct links and what to use those other direct links for that you see on the site as well. Following this, we'll touch base on a couple key takeaways and reminders from today's presentation. We'll go over some resources. So if you do want to have, additional resources to refer to further your learning, we'll go over those at the very end there. And then the last 10-15 minutes we'll set aside for some Q&A. So if you do have any questions, again, feel free to pop those into the chat there, and we'll get to them at the very end of the call. All right, so client updates. How can you really use the client update feature on eAdvisor MFDA? Now you can use this for, different types of updates you're doing. If you're doing multiple updates, if you're doing a single update, you'll want to be using this feature. So a couple of examples here are, if you're updating contact information for your client, updating any KYC information, any of that account information such as RIF payments, if you want to change the beneficiary, for example. You can also utilize this feature to add any persons of interest onto an existing account, so such as a power of attorney or trading authority, or if you wanted to update the trusted contact person for your clients, you can do that through the client update feature as well. And a few other different things you can utilize this feature for are changing things such as the preference for delivery of documents. Most of you know that clients can change this preference on the Credential Online portal, but if they prefer their advisor to do it on their end, you have the ability to do this through eAdvisor MFDA as well. And then you also have the opportunity to include new EFT authorizations, any kind of PAC requests to be set up for the clients, or transfer requests to be processed. You'll be able to do this through the funding page there. Now, this is a standalone option too under the direct link. So we'll go over, when to use the standalone and then where that's located within the client update workflow. And so what are the benefits of using the client update feature on eAdvisor MFDA? So if you're familiar with the discovery workflow, which my colleague Eric actually presented a webinar early last week on the discovery workflow. So if you didn't have a chance to catch that, it is available on Academy for you to refer to. And we do break up the webinars into different video chapters. So, you can kind of see where you want to skip to really focus on a particular piece of the content, or you can watch the full duration too. So if you didn't get a chance to check that out, feel free to check that out on your Academy site. Now, if you're familiar with that process, you know that the discovery is right before the client management workflow. Now, when you use the client update feature, it actually bypasses that whole discovery workflow, and it will bring you into the client management workflow there, which is essentially where the client updates starts. So you have the ability to update multiple things within one workflow, right? So as I mentioned earlier, depending on what you're updating, you can update single pieces of information. You can update multiple pieces of information for a client based on what's changed in their life. And then you also have the opportunity to trigger the standalone address update feature, which I'll be going through in our demo today. Really what that feature is, if you are simply just doing an address update or a contact information update. So for example, if your client's changing their email address or phone number, things like that, you will be able to utilize the standalone address update. So I'll show you how that works because it is kind of an expedited workflow, so you don't have to move through all of those screens to get to that signing page to obtain the client signature there. You also have the opportunity to utilize eSign to submit those type of changes through eAdvisor. So a really fast way to obtain that signature from your client to process the request. And then you also have the ability to review the changes submitted and their previous values. So we'll go over, after you submit a client update to the system, you'll be able to actually review that within the document approval section, and you'll be able to see what you've changed exactly within that client update. So the previous value that was there, and then what you changed with your new submission, those types of pieces of information there. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and get started with our live demonstration. I'm just going to flip to another window here. So we're going to start on the KXG page just because I want to show everyone where to access the training site. All MFDA advisors should have access to the training sites here, so you'll be able to see the training sites right underneath the live production site. So the live production site will have, just the name of the system here, so eAdvisor MFDA, and just under that will be the training site. You'll be able to differentiate between the two just because training is right beside the system name there. So make sure you click on the training site. I always, just double check on the URL too to ensure that it says PIP demo. And that way, you are in the training site and not in the production site there. There we go. So appdemo.adviso.ca/pip there. All right, so this is eAdvisor MFDA. We'll mainly be focusing on the direct links here today. And we'll be starting with the client update workflow here. So I'll start with the client update, and then we'll kind of go through, the funding, the RIF payment change. I'll briefly go over these two standalone features here. Once we submit the update, we'll go into document approvals to show you what that looks like once the KYC update has been submitted to the system there. So let's dive right in. I'm going to do a client update for an existing client I have in the system here, and just be reminded that you can only do a client update for an existing client in the system, right? So if you are planning on adding a new client into the system, you will have to select the new client option to go through that discovery workflow and then follow suit with the client management workflow, which we'll be going through today. So I'm just going to pull up my existing client here. And again, if you have access to the training site, feel free to follow along here. So pull up any client you'd like. I'll go ahead and search up my existing client here. And then we'll just select our client by selecting their name in the search results here. So I'll click on my client happiness. Now, you'll receive this message if you've already started a KYC update for this client. So I did play around in the system a little bit earlier today to just make sure it was working. So this is why we see a pending KYC update started for this client. Now, if you have a KYC update where you're going through, you have to confirm something with the client before you submit it, you can certainly, save it just by exiting out. It automatically saves the information that you input into that current client update. And then when you research the client's name here, you'll be able to reselect that pending KYC update to continue off of where you left. But for today's demo, we will be starting a new KYC update. So I'll select Start a New KYC Update to give us just a fresh new KYC update workflow here. All right, so first thing I wanted to point out on this screen is you'll see the workflow at the very top of the screen here. This is how we know we're in the client management screen. If you're familiar with the discovery workflow, the workflow will be, the navigation bar will be on the left-hand side, kind of going down, descending. When you're in the client management workflow, so this is really more of like the account setup workflow, it will be on the top here going horizontally, and you'll be able to see the different stages we'll have to go through in order to get that signed and submitted to the system there. So that's just an easy way to follow along to see where you're at within the workflow. Now, moving down the screen here, we obviously have our advisor name and our rep code automatically populated along with any other information we have on file for this client currently will be pre-populated here. So the first page here, the account page, a couple options that you can update here. If the client would like their documents to be in a French language, you do have the opportunity to switch that from English to French here. And then all the correspondence sent out to the client will then be in the French language there. Now, ownership is locked down. You won't be able to make any changes to that. So we'll move on from that field, but just note that when you're doing a client update, you won't be able to make that change for the ownership there. That will indeed be locked down. Couple other things that are locked down. When you're opening account, the custody of assets will also be locked down. So you can't use this feature to switch, a nominee to a client name. That does require a new account to be opened, which is why you'll have to go through, the account opening workflow there in order to open up a client name, for example. Now, what you can do on this page is change the fee model. So, if you are able to open up fee-based accounts, let's say you have an existing client who's in a commission-based account, you can actually toggle this to on-point fee-based to actually switch this account from a commission-based to an on-point fee-based account. And once you click on the on-point fee-based, it will add the applicable on-point agreement forms to the workflow for you to fill out to ensure that you have that agreement on file and we get that signed by the client and submitted to process that request there. So here we'll list all the accounts the client has. So as we can see, we got a cash non-registered account, we have an RSP account, and we have a TFSA account and another cash account here. I've used this client a lot, so they'll kind of have, multiple accounts here, all commission-based. All right, so I'm not going to change any fee models today. I'm going to leave them as commission-based, but do note you do have the opportunity to change commission-based to on-point fee-based using the client update feature there. Now I'm going to go to the next page here. And as you can see, we've now moved from the account page over to the applicant information page. Now, the only difference between going from the discovery workflow into this workflow and then starting from this workflow, so the client update workflow there, is the discovery workflow when you fill out all that information for the client and then you come into this workflow, you'll notice that most of this information will actually be locked down. And the only reason that occurs is just because for the discovery workflow, it's actually pulling that information you filled out within the discovery over onto this workflow because it wants to ensure that the information is consistent between two workflows. So that's the only notable difference. However, when you start from client update workflow, it'll go through this workflow here. You'll notice that you'll be able to change any of these fields here on the screen. One other thing I wanted to note here is the SIN number will be locked down. So if you do see, a discrepancy in the SIN number that it appears to be incorrectly input, that will be an offline process, okay? So you can't do that through the client update feature. To change the SIN number to correct it would be an offline procedure. Essentially, just getting a letter of direction signed by the client and uploading that to KXG document upload tool there. Now I wanted to show you the standalone address update feature. And so there's a few things to note for that feature. That feature is only going to trigger if you're changing a few different fields. So if you change any other fields, it's not going to trigger. However, if you if you change any contact information such as email address, phone number, business phone number, or mobile phone number or address, and you're not changing anything else, that's what's going to trigger the standalone address update feature. So maybe, I'll just change the phone number for the client, and maybe we'll change the address as well. Let's say they moved, they got a new phone number, and they have a new address, and nothing else has changed. Everything else is exactly the same for the client. We just want to do a simple, contact information update for this client. So I've only changed the phone number and the address at this point. Now, when I click next, what happens here is you're going to get a little pop-up. So this pop-up says, on the previous screen, you only updated the address and contact information. A change of address is often associated with other significant changes in personal or financial circumstances. So this is just kind of, making sure that there are no further changes that the client needs to make at this time. It's just simply a contact information and address update at this time. So you have two options here. You can select, yes, I need to make other changes to the client's profile via KYC, and that will then bring you back into the workflow so that you go through all of the screens within the workflow. Or if this is the only pieces you need to change for this client, you can select no. I confirm and acknowledge that only the address and or contact information has changed and there are no other changes to the personal or financial circumstances. So clicking on no is actually going to bypass these screens here, and it's going to go right into the signing screen. So essentially it's a bit of an expedited process, just so you don't have to click through all of those screens if you already know that you're only making these changes. And then you get to jump right to the signing page there to obtain the client signature. So I'm going to go back because I do want to go through the whole workflow. I just wanted to show you how to trigger that standalone address update. I'm just seeing a quick question pop up here. Would the signing generate a full NAF to sign off though? No, it wouldn't. So when you actually trigger that standalone address update, when you get to the signing option, it's going to be a different form that populates within the document package there. It's just going to be a simple address update form, and then it's going to include the changes that you've made to be submitted to the back office there to process that request. All right, so other things that you can change within the client updates, you have the marital status here. So if any of those types of information has changed, you can make the applicable changes here. Just note that if you do change to, married, for example, you will be required to fill out that spousal information. So this box will actually populate once you select that particular marital status there. I'm just going to keep it simple and leave this client as single for now. I just wanted to make note of that there. And then, of course, all of these other fields here are also open to update for the clients. I'm going to leave it as is just to keep this simple. But of course, if they have changed, employment, you can take the opportunity to update those details within this section here. All right, so just because we've made those two changes on this page, it is prompting that same message. I'm just going to select yes, I need to make other changes to the client's profile via KYC, and we'll jump to the next page there. So the applicant information will also bring you into this registered account information page. So if your client holds any registered accounts, such as RSPs, TFSAs, etc., it will bring you to this page. And on this page, there's a couple things that you can change. So you can change the trustee fee payment option. This is also known as the annual administration fee that gets pulled from the client every year. It is defaulted to be taken out of their nominee registered plan there. But we have a couple different options to select here too. You can select by EFT, so this option will be taken directly from the client's bank account. They will have to have a bank account on file though, so make sure that if you do select by EFT that the banking information is on file already in order for the back office to pull for that annual admin fee. We also have the From My Cash account, so able to pull from a non-registered cash account to cover that fee. And we also have Rep Pay, where the rep actually will satisfy that annual administration fee for the clients. I would recommend to speak to your wealth leader about this option just to see if that's an applicable option for you. I think most advisors leave it to just be taken out of their nominee registered plan there. The beneficiary designation, you also have the opportunity to change the beneficiary on this page as well. So the defaults will be on My Estate, but if you did want to, designate particular individuals as the beneficiaries, you can select Other here, and this is where you can enter those details of that particular beneficiary. Now, you can also add multiple beneficiaries. You just have to make sure that the ownership, the percentage here, equates to 100%. Otherwise, you'll get an error. So just make sure if you are adding multiple, we are filling this out to equate to 100% here. So I'll delete that and leave that simple and just leave it as the default as My Estate and move on. And of course, you can make those selections for each type of account there. Now, when I go to the next page, we're going to get to the financial profile. So we're on the third step here of the workflow. So this is going to present the KYC information for the client. Now, you can make changes to this, but realistically, if you are revisiting the KYC, I'd recommend to go through the discovery process again to ensure, you get that investment questionnaire, you get that recommendation by the system, and then you can assess from there what's most suitable for your clients, and then that will actually update this automatically here. But if you do have changes, if you've used a BCM approved different investment questionnaire, feel free to fill out those differences or updates in this section here. And then as you can see, it's just the KYC for each account. So listing the non-registered account, the RSP account, and the TFSA account. And then at the very bottom here, we have the risk profile confirmation. This will populate your previous selections that you would have had to go through setting up this client in the system. So if nothing's changed there, you can leave that as is or make changes as applicable. So on this next page, we're still at the financial profile section here. So here is where you'll list the client's net worth. So if there are any changes in, liquid assets, fixed assets, annual income, perhaps that's changed if they got a promotion or something like this, you can update those details within this section here as well. I'm just going to take a brief pause for a second because I know a lot of questions have popped up here. So let me take a look at the chat. I see there's questions about the eNAV. That's just an old system. I have all of the old kind of systems listed on my KXG, so you can ignore that for now. That's not a system that we use anymore. Another question regarding CE credits. This particular webinar is not eligible for CE credits. I'm sorry to say, but it is a really great webinar to understand the system a little bit more, the features within the system, and how you can kind of become a little bit more familiarized with navigating the systems in front of your clients there. Yeah, there's a comment here where the phone number has been locked for the client going through the client update. Now that shouldn't happen. It should only be the SIN number that's locking down on that contact information page. So that could just be a glitch in the system. You should be able to change the phone numbers for the client as well as the address. So if you are getting a blocked phone number, I maybe would send that to the service center to get that checked out. And one last question before I continue here, and I'll revisit the other questions that have popped in the box at a later time in the presentation. So one other question here is, does the change to address or contact info trigger the member to log in and e-sign? So if you're using the eSign option, it will trigger an email to be sent out to the client, right? Once you get to the signing stage here, it's going to present two options. So you can either print it out, have the client sign in person, or if they're interested in eSign, they have a valid email address, you can utilize that as well. Now, the eSign process, what it does is essentially triggers an email out to the client. They'll have to enter in a security code, which will be your rep code, and that will guide them through the eSign ceremony process. So we will be going through that in a little bit here, so just hang tight so you can see that workflow and how that works as well. All right, so I'm just going to continue on here so we can get through the workflow there, and then I'll revisit the questions again. So on the other interests page here, as you can see, we're now here on the workflow. This is where you can add folks like trading authorities, power of attorneys. Your trusted contact persons will be coming up on the next page there. But if you do select yes, a document will populate at the very end here. So it will be included in the document package. Just note, for other interests being added into the account, we do require a wet signature to be obtained for both trading authorizations and power of attorneys to be added to the account. So just something to keep in mind if you're using the e-sign option for the other documents to be signed, just note that these do require wet signatures. And if you do want to refer to certain processes in terms of whether or not you can use the e-sign, all of that information is provided on the Procedure Center. So feel free to just navigate to the Procedure Center to the applicable process that you're looking for, and it will let you know whether or not it requires web sign only. All right, so moving down the screen, we just have a leveraging question there, a yes or no leveraging question. I'll leave that as no for my client. And then the investment needs here. So these will automatically populate of when you first enter them for when you open the accounts. But if that does change, you can make those changes within this screen here. So this is the second part of the other interest section here. As you can see, you have the trusted contact person question built into this page here. Bit of a newer other interest, I guess, to add to the account here. This came with the client focused reforms kind of rules within January last year. So if you do kind of want to understand a little bit more of trusted contact persons, I believe there is a webinar coming up on this, or you can check out the Compliance Center on KXG to kind of understand a little bit more on what a trusted contact person is and how to explain that to your client there. You do have a little kind of tool tip, I guess you could say, right here as well, that explains what a trusted contact person is to help you explain that to the client as well. So if you do select yes, you'll just be required to insert the first and last name of that individual, the relationship to the client, and the phone number. So these are the only required pieces of information, and there's no other further documents to add to the package to include a trusted contact person to the account. It's only these pieces of information we need, no other separate documents needed. Now moving on in this page, we have the tax resident question. I'm going to leave that as Canada. Then we have just the politically exposed person or head of international organization question here. If you do need to add this form to the document package, you can click on this and this will actually download that form for you. Once you select yes, just download that form and then you can add it into the package as well there. Now moving towards the bottom of the page, we're coming to the consents and acknowledgements. Now this first question is the very first question that you're prompted to answer when you start a new discovery for the clients. The second question, we'll spend a little bit of time on this. So there's a newer feature on this question here. So before it used to just be I consent or I do not consent. And we've received feedback in that, clients do or may want to receive electronic copies of certain documents and then paper copies of other documents. So if your client would like to receive a paper copy of their document, but also have access to electronic copies, what you can do is select I consent. They are required to have an email address, so that must be entered here too. And then you can select any type of document the client would like via paper copy here. So for example, if my client wanted tax documents sent to them via paper copy, you would just make that selection here. All right. So that was preference of delivery of documents, and then just one securities related activities in a Canadian financial institution question there before it's kind of the end of the workflow here to fill out. Now you do have the notes to branch manager and ops comments box here. So if there are any notes you'd like the branch manager to know about or the operations team, feel free to fill that out here. Just note that any comments entered in this box will be visible to the client because it is added to the NAV package when you're submitting it there. So maybe I'll just show you what that looks like too once we download the actual document package. All right, so that was the notes box. Now moving on to the next page will bring us to the review page here. So the review page is one last opportunity to review any of that information, right? So we can take a look to make sure everything is correct or has been correctly inputted into the system. Our changes look good. If we do see a discrepancy that we need to go back and change, you can simply select the edit button here and it will bring you back to that page to make that correction. So, let's just say everything looks good for our clients. We've double checked, everything is correct. And now here's where you can save it as a draft if you're not with your client at this time and maybe you want to revisit something. Would recommend to save it as a draft at this point. But if you see that everything is correct and it's ready to be signed off by the client on, we can select next here to go to the funding page. So second to last piece of the workflow before we get into the signing options there. So on the funding page, 3 different things you can do on here. You can set up a new EFT for the client, so new banking information on file for the clients. Of course, you'll have to fill in those details such as, the transit number, institution number, account number. You will have to provide a copy of a clear copy of the void check. We do also accept banking letters of confirmation and direct deposit forms as well. So those are also valid, but please do ensure you upload that here. And then once you have all of the information filled out and the check uploaded or the void check uploaded, you would want to click on submit. And this would then include the EFT authorization form along with your copy of the void check within the document package for the operations team to review there. So it's just really important that you do click that submit button. Otherwise, this information won't be going anywhere. just ensure you are clicking on that submit button for it to register in the system and then get populated onto the appropriate form there, okay? Now, we do have a newer option here that hasn't quite been updated on the training site yet, but you may have noticed this on the live production site. So this option will actually now say manage pack. And what that means is you have the opportunity to not only start a new pack request, but you can also submit change pack requests as well as stop pack requests using the funding page there. So just note that you can utilize that, and we do accept e-signature for that process. So if you are wanting to change, an existing pack, you can utilize that funding direct link to jump right to this page and then get that signed via eSign with the client there. One other thing that I'll note here is the amounts does not accept decimals, so it will have to be a whole number. So if you can't do something like 5550 or anything like that. It'll just have to be input as 55. If you do try and write a decimal, it will kind of appear and then disappear. So whole numbers for the amount to be inserted there. And then we also do require the fund name and fund code to be entered in here as well. So if you're having, some issues with what the fund code is, maybe you're not aware of the fund code, but you know the fund name, you can utilize the securities tab on data file to search up that particular fund and receive the correct fund code to enter into this box here. And then one other last thing that I'd like to point out, a few things on the pack actually. Best practice is to always ensure you have an initial purchase into the fund, right? So when we process the pack request, it's going to show up on the client's account, but it's not going to run if you have not made an initial purchase. And that's coming from the fund company side, right? So in order for them to ensure that, or in order for your pack to run, you need to make sure you're setting up that initial purchase for that pack to run properly there. So my recommendation is, make that first purchase on the run date and then select the effective date for the next run date. So if that's a month from now, so enter in that a month later from now of when you want it to run, and just ensure you make that initial purchase. All right, so that's the pack setup. And then last, we have the transfer initiation. So if you are planning to initiate a transfer in from another institution, you can utilize this section as well here. Of course, you'll have to fill out the information here, which account that is transferring into, which financial institution that's coming from, the account number on that end as well, the transfer type here, the approximate account value to help out our transfers team to ensure everything has come over. And then we also, it is optional, but I highly recommend to upload a recent statement from the relinquishing institution as well here. And this just helps, especially for transfers in kind, this helps our transfers team understand what has come over and what has yet to come over, or if the transfer has been completed at that point. Because, the relinquishing institution will never let us or provide that information for us. So we need to make sure that we are giving that statement to our back office just so that they have reference of what's coming over for that particular account there. All right, so that's the funding page. I'm not going to fill out anything for the funding page. So, if you decide not to do anything on this page, you can just select skip and fund later. And what that will do is it'll bring you to the next page there. All right, so I'm going to demo the eSign because I know Eric demoed the print to sign in the last Discovery webinar. I do want to show you the document package though, so I'm going to actually download the documents here. So if you are clicking print to sign, you'll have the opportunity to download the documents, review that with the client, and print that off and have them sign it there. Just doing one quick upload here. Okay. There we go. All right, so here is the document package. As we can see, it is a NAF form. And it has all of our updated information there as well. So, we can review this with the client to make sure it's all filled out correctly. The account information box is going to be blank unless you've made any changes to the accounts that pertain to any of these pieces of information. So for example, going back a little bit, if you did adjust the account from commission-based to account-based or to on-point fee-based, sorry, it would actually populate here on this line. So if no accounts have any changes made within this client updates, you'll notice that the box here is blank and that is functioning properly there. So don't be alarmed if you're not seeing anything there. It just means that you haven't made any changes to the accounts and that's why they're not showing up here. All right, so you could basically see everything that we've gone through on the form here. It's all been pre-populated, all ready for the client to sign off on. And then with those notes that I made in the notes box there, you'll see the comments right here. So again, the client will see this. They will be visible to the client because it will be included on their NAV form here. Okay. So if you are using this option, we are wanting to research the client up, go back into the workflow. It's going to bring you exactly to the signing page, and then you'll just have to upload the document here. Please do select the correct document type. So if it is a NAF, select the application package option. If it's a transfer, select the transfer option. And if it's funding, select the funding option there. So I'm going to go back because we're going to do eSign. So when you click on eSign, what will happen here is the email address that we inserted for the client or they have on file already for the clients from the applicant information page will populate in this section here. Now you do have the opportunity to change this by selecting that edit button, but what happens when you change this is it's going to kick back and save in the applicant information page as well. So any changes you make here will reflect on the NAF as well there. So just make sure you understand that before you make any changes to the email address within this section here. I'm going to leave as is because I do want it to send to my email. So once you have that address in that box, you can select the send button. And what that will do is trigger an email to be sent out to the clients. You'll get a success message that just says an email has been sent out to the applicant to complete their e-signature there. Now, if the client hasn't found the email in their inbox, it's likely that it could have gone into their spam and or junk folders. So make sure you tell them to look in those folders as well if it hasn't come through their main inbox. And then if you ever do need to resend it out to the clients, you can research the client in the system. You'll come back to this page and you'll be able to select this resend button here. Just note, if you do resend out a new email, the previous email will then become null and void, so they will have to continue with the new email that's been sent out to them. All right, so let me open that email to show you what that looks like. Okay, now I have everything on dark mode, so I hope everyone can see this okay. So this is essentially what it looks like. A few of my things aren't downloading here. So here's where the Credential Asset Management logo is supposed to appear here, but essentially they will get an email from Credential. When it is coming from the demo site, it's going to say demo here. But this is what the email essentially says. It says you are receiving this email as a result of an account update you initiated with Credential Asset Management. Your Credential Asset Management documents are ready for you to sign. Please review and add your electronic signature. So what they'll need to do is they'll need to select Go to Documents. And what this will do is it will initiate the eSign ceremony for them. So this is through OneSpan. The first thing the client needs to do is enter the security code. Now just note the security code is always going to be your rep code. So make sure to provide that to them before you send out this email or they'll be a little confused. So I'm going to enter in our rep code that we used for this particular client, and then they just need to select login once they've entered that. And what will happen, it'll bring them to the eSign disclosures and document page here. So what they need to do at this point is just ensure they read the eSign disclosures and consent document. And then once they've, consent to doing the eSign ceremony, they must click accept at the bottom here. That will pop up if they go to the very bottom, or they can select I have read and agree to the terms of the eSign disclosure document here and accept. So once they accept, it's going to bring them into the documentation here. And just as we saw with the print and sign, the exact same documents that are populating here for the client to sign. So they have this opportunity to, review all of the information that's on these forms to make sure it looks good. And then in the areas where they need to sign, there's going to be, I'm just going to jump to that section. There's going to be a little teal box here that says sign. And what they can actually do too is if they've already reviewed the documentation with you, let's say, they can just select next, and that's going to bring them right to the area where they need to sign without having to, go and find it essentially. So once they click on sign, it is going to ask them to draw their signature. So I'm just going to draw my signature there. If they're not happy with it, they can clear it, draw it again. And then once they're satisfied with their signature there, they can select done. And what that will do is it will print their name in full here on the applicant signature line. It will also include their signature that they just drew out, as well as the date they signed here as well. Now it says done here, so this has been satisfied. If there was another document to sign, this button will still reflect next so that they can jump to the next section where they need to sign there. And then once the client's finished signing, all they need to do is click confirm. It'll give them the success message. Your documents have been successfully signed and submitted for approval. They'll be able to download the documents for their own files if they'd like, or they can go back and review them. They'll also get a confirmation email just saying that their e-signature has been completed for those documents as well. Okay, so that's eSign in a nutshell. Now let's see what this looks like on document approvals. I'm just going to revisit the questions at the very end there just because it is getting close to time here, so I want to make sure we go through everything there. So I want to go next to document approvals. So you can essentially use document approvals for any type of reviewing submissions or if you want to follow up on your submissions, this is exactly where you would go, right? So I'm going to go into document approvals, and this is for both new accounts that are being opened as well as client updates can be reviewed within this section here. We're going to jump into that system. We are going to find our clients. As you can see, I have quite a few submissions for this client here, but this is our submission that we are wanting to review. So it's today's date here. We have a little bit of information pertaining to this submission. So we know that this is the submission we want to look at. And you'll be able to differentiate what are client updates and what are new accounts being opened, right? So if you're opening a new account, let's say you're going through the discovery workflow, it's going to appear as app. And if you're going through the client update workflow, it's going to appear as KYC. So you can click anywhere on the row to bring you into a more detailed view of the submission. And this is what the detailed view looks like. So we got, summary of information at the top, all the account numbers that this client has here, what signature option was used there or signature method. You'll notice that the documents that are here are unsigned. However, if you go to the documents at the very bottom here, you'll be able to review the ones that the client signed. So just make note of that. This copy is going to be the document that was unsigned. The document at the bottom will be the document that the client has signed. Now, what's neat about this is within this box, it does differentiate, what are the items that you changed within this submission. So as we can see, I did make an address update. So this was the previous address on the right side here. This is the information we updated it with, right? So really easy to kind of understand what changes you made within previous KYC updates to make sure you've, dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's. And then we also made change to the phone number there as well. Yeah, so kind of a neat place to just understand what's changed here. And then there is a little message here as well. So, most fields will populate here, kind of indicating that you've made a change from the previous value that we had on file. Now, we don't currently have the risk profile confirmation and the trusted contact person sections available to populate within this box. So just keep in mind that you won't see these two particular pieces of information within this box here. So don't be alarmed if you made a change and you're not seeing it in this box, just for those two pieces of information. Now, if you do have anything you want to say to the ops or the BCM here, you do have that opportunity to add notes here. And these notes will not be visible to the client, right? So, if you did have notes that you don't want to be visible to the client, you can certainly add those notes here, and you just click submit, and that will feed through to the system. Another line will essentially populate here along with your notes. At times, the BCM or ops team may reject back to you because they're missing a piece of information or, a separate document that may have been required for that particular request. So you also have the opportunity to upload documents here too, right? So you could essentially go into document approvals. You might see, there's a little note from the operations team saying we need a clear copy of the void check. You can then upload that document to this workflow essentially and provide it to them. So just a couple notes there on the document approvals page. All right, so that was document approvals. One last thing I wanted to go through is just reviewing these other two standalone updates here. A bit more of newer features on eAdvisor MFDA. So we'll start with the funding page. So the funding page, essentially the same funding page you saw in the last workflow, right? It's going to prompt you to enter in a client, an existing client here. So I'm just going to search up the same client. And then I'll select the client by clicking on their name. All right. And so for this workflow, another expedited workflow. So if nothing else was changing, but, maybe during account opening, you didn't have pieces of information that you needed from the clients who upload that new EFT on file. So this is a great option to kind of expedite that process and utilize the e-signature method at the same time there to obtain signature from your client, right? So as you can see, just that one page until we get to the signing page there, just the one page workflow. And it's the exact same page as you saw within the client update workflow, right? So opportunity to set up EFTs, opportunity to set up and manage existing packs here, and then opportunities to initiate new transfer ins from the client there. And then, of course, you can jump right to the signing options, get that signed right away, and submit it for processing. So a neat expedited process that you can utilize within the direct links section of eAdvisor MFDA. And then one last thing I wanted to point out is the RIF payment change direct links feature here. So the RIF payment change feature, it is only applicable for clients who are holding income plan accounts. So if you do try and search up a client who's not holding an income plan account, it's actually going to give you an error just because it doesn't function that way, right? But if you do have a client that does have a RIF payment or a RIF account, for example, or income plan, it will prompt you to make changes to each of those accounts that the client holds. So you will have to go through, those RIF payment screens or income plan payment screens there, and just an expedited process to essentially make those changes to the payments of an income plan there. So you don't have to go through, the client update. You don't have to go through the discovery workflows, just a really quick way to update those payment instructions for the client there. Now, eSign isn't available for this, and unfortunately, it doesn't have the same capabilities of the client update feature either. So when you are making changes, you can't actually exit out and then have the client sign it at a later time. So we are we're building out, a new enhancement to ensure that we have the eSign feature embedded into this standalone update as well. However, at this time, it is only print to sign. And what I would recommend is if you have a client coming into the branch where you can do this together, this is when this would be most applicable at this time, just because the eSign feature isn't there. And you can exit out without having to restart and input those details again at a later time. So if you do have the client coming in and they do want to change their payment instructions, I would recommend using this process here. All right, so I think that's everything I wanted to go over. I'll jump back into the PowerPoint quickly here because I had a few more things that I wanted to go over with everyone. Just a few key takeaways and reminders here. So, you can utilize the client update feature to process changes to client and or account information. You saw the different various pieces of information that we could change utilizing that client update feature. We saw that you can trigger the standalone address update feature using that client update workflow as well. And to trigger that, again, you can only change the contact information or address information for the client to prompt that next message when you click next to go to the next screen there. A quick reminder that a full discovery review should be completed when there are material changes. So please do go through the discovery review for your existing clients if there are large material changes there. And of course, utilize the standalone features where applicable, where you can to be most efficient in your practice and save time there. A few other reminders I wanted to go over is just, again, the SIN number cannot be updated via the client update workflow. You will need a signed letter of direction or an updated copy of the NAF that you've manually written in the SIN number there. That can be updated and submitted through the document upload tool on KXG. So it's just a reminder that that is an offline process to change the SIN number for a client there. And then for the standalone RIF payment change feature, again, just wanted to reiterate that the print and sign is only available for this feature right now. So it's ideal for when your clients are coming into the branch to make those changes there. And another quick reminder that the investment questionnaire cannot be triggered via the client update. So if you are looking to trigger the investment questionnaire to go through with the client, you will have to go through that discovery workflow. All right, a quick little pivot here to show you where you can find additional resources. So I'm going to go back to your KXG page here. And where I want to really focus on is the procedure center. This really should be, your first go-to point of resource when you are wanting to review a particular procedure. For this audience, you're going to want to use the MFDA dropdown here. There are both procedures laid out for nominee and client name, so feel free to click the appropriate selection. We have the subtopics here, so you can go over a topic to see, which one's most applicable for you. If you're wanting to, learn more about how to make a purchase on data file, you can certainly select that, and I'll give you the breakdown of those steps as well there. Another area I wanted to focus on in Procedure Center was the knowledge bites, and then the library here, and then just moving to the IROC and MFDA best practice videos. So my colleague Eric and I, we've built out these quick learning videos, essentially. They're typically less than 10 minutes. And what you can do is you can utilize the drop downs here to select a particular video that you want to review quickly for a process here. So for example, if you want to look more at the A&L details page within the discovery workflow, that's available here for you. You also have our newer video that we posted is the client builder video. So if you want to understand, how the client builder feature works on eAdvisor, we have those videos available here for you to refer to. And if you don't want to watch the whole duration, just remember that you can review the video chapters here and jump to that time in the video to focus on a particular piece of content there. And lastly, I just like to remind everyone that you do have your Academy site here too. This is where you can go to, watch any recorded webinars that we've done in the past for system training. So as I mentioned, Eric did our discovery workflow earlier last week. You can refer here to your CEU Wealth portal. Essentially, you would have to just jump to the course catalog to see the options here. You have your MFDA CE accredited webinars. You'll find Eric and my webinars under systems training. So these unfortunately are not accredited for CE credits, but they're really great webinars to really understand the system so you can be, more comfortable and confident in front of your client when they're coming in and you have a session with them in the office there. All right, so that's everything I wanted to go over. Here's just another overview of our resources there. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. I know it was a lot of information to go over. So again, if you do want to refer to a particular piece of the presentation today, I would highly recommend just taking a look at the video chapters, jumping right to that section to understand a little bit more there. So I'm going to take a quick look at the Q&A section here. I completely understand if you do have to drop off. Feel free to send questions to learningadviso.ca regarding systems or procedures there, and we'll be happy to assist you there as well if you can't stay on the call. But I'm going to go ahead and review our Q&A because I see quite a few coming in. Okay, so I spoke to some of these earlier. Just a reminder for the standalone address update feature, if you are utilizing that expedited process, the form at the end won't be the full NAF. It'll just be essentially just an address update form with the updated contact information and or address information that you changed there. And you can use the eSign option for that feature as well. Now, there's another good question here. What if you want to update the beneficiary only? Is there a similar workaround to the standalone address update? We don't currently have a standalone update for the beneficiary. So you will essentially have to go through the client update and just jump to that screen. If that's the only thing you're changing, just jump to that screen and then click next till you get to the signing options there. We may have a future enhancement embedded into eAdvisor to accommodate the beneficiary changes there. So stay tuned for more information. Couple questions on whether or not contingent beneficiaries can be added there. Unfortunately, they cannot be added in that beneficiary section, so you will have to complete the contingent beneficiary processes offline as well. So just refer to the procedure center. That is going to be an offline process to get that changed and updated there. Another good question, I believe in the procedure center, it says that when we change the SIN number, we have to complete the offline NAF. So that is an option too. If it doesn't say anything about a letter of direction there, I'll submit an update because that is an applicable way that you can do that too. It's an acceptable process that we accept here. So you can either submit the letter of direction there with the client signature indicating the correct SIN number, or you can complete a NAF offline as well and submit that offline as well if you prefer to do it that way. Another question here from Nick. I read about a change to net worth where we can make it negative. Is this now functional? So previously, it wouldn't accept a negative net worth. However, it does accept a negative net worth currently. So previously, it would actually not allow you to proceed. It does allow you to have it currently, but it will essentially just zero it out at the bottom there. So you just if it is negative, I would just make notes to ensure that that's reflected accurately on the NAF there with the details that you insert in the notes section there. Okay, there's a ton of questions that actually came through. So I'm going to take most of these away and I will get back to everyone individually there. Again, if you do have questions after today's presentation, feel free to shoot those to learning@eviso.ca and we'll be happy to help you. But I think I'll call it there for today. So on behalf of Eviso Wealth, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar and we hope to see you at the next one. Have a great day, everyone.